Hello, everyone, and welcome to another study and win a prize session. So, today is a very special day because this is the first session in 2023, and I can come backstage. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see me. I'm back on. Okay, so that's me saying hi for everybody. And I saw that Taiwo joined in very early. We're excited to have you here. Taiwo, say hi to everyone. Taiwo Latif. And we are happy to have everyone that joined in on very early. Yeah, welcome Taiwo. Welcome Depoju. Welcome. Welcome. Who else is here? David, Gabriel, Justin, you're all welcome, and we're very excited to have you here. Yes, Justin, yes, you're welcome. So we're so excited that this is a brand new year, and people still made out time to join us for this session. And this session promises to be very, very interesting. It promises to be very, very interesting. We have a new instructor that we've not seen before that didn't take throughout last year. So we're starting just like new year, a fresh start. And so we should pay attention to these. We're going to still learn, even though we've known some things or we don't know. We just make up our mind to learn, relearn. So before we start, can we tell us how we spent our festive seasons? You can put it in the chat so that we'll get to know how you spent the Christmas season and the New Year. And you can also put your New Year resolution. So we can go like this. How you spent your Christmas season. What's one thing that you can take away from the period, the festive period? One thing that you're planning to do, like your New Year resolution. That's if you're a fan of New Year resolution. And then how you plan to go about in your cloud journey this year. So we have three things that you should put up for us: how your festive season was, your New Year resolution, the plans you're planning to make generally, and then the steps you want to take for your cloud journey. So we're waiting for you guys. For me, okay, I'll go ahead and start. For me, the festive period was like an unwinding session for me. Like I would just tag it as unwinding. Like I had time to relax. And when I got back, a whole lot of people were saying, you added. So that means I really took a whole lot of break. Then my New Year resolution is to go harder. And then for my cloud journey, it's to still like do like a refresher and then unlearn and relearn for the cloud journey till I get there. So those are my steps. So what's yours? We are excited and we can't wait to hear from you. Are we still on? Please drop it in the comment section so that we'll be able to see, everyone will see it. Hello, people. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, please. So we are still going through the three things we have to drop: how your festive season was, what's your New Year resolution if you're a fan of that, and what steps you plan to take for your cloud journey. And I'm yet to get anyone sending a comment about that. So while we're waiting for people to send in that, we Oh, so I see people are not yet so active on this. So we are covering security aspects of our network communications. Yes, we're covering security aspects of our network communications. So for this section, just as usual, how we normally do, we'll still have prizes at the end. So make sure you pay very close attention so that you'll be able to win. And I'm very happy, certain that those that have won the prizes will make great use of it. So yes, Mr. Let me not mispronounce your name, please. Mr. Moyo, he went on an adventure. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay. to build more capacity. That's beautiful. And New Year in advance. Okay, great. Then Mr. David's New Year resolution is to perfect his AWS networking. Now, AWS networking is really something that is really a good thing to put as a New Year resolution, because getting the hang of networking is like is gold. So kudos to you. That's okay. Over to you, Tayo. Tayo, how are you? Welcome on board. Hello, Tayo. Are you
Hi,
on?
Blessing.
Okay.
Yes,
How
I
was?
am.
Thank you for joining in on our. We are catching cruise before you joined in. So you also have to tell us how your holiday went before we start. Before we get into the serious matter. So we talked on. So we're still discussing on how the holiday went, what you
Okay.
did, your new resolution if you're a fan of that, and then
Right. Thank you very much. My holiday was quite restful. I took out time to improve my skills in some of my AWS certifications that I'm aspiring to get. And I also took time to help some people learn uh, some AWS services. I did that briefly, and I also had time to rest. So it was a combination of all three.
that's awesome. Tayo did not rest at all. That really, this description just really looks like lot of my normal work life. But okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So I know you're ready and ready to take us off for the day. So over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. Um, Please let me know as soon as you guys can see my screen. Oops.
In case we don't know, I'm sure Tayo would introduce himself as we continue, but Tayo is a very resourceful person. Just like he said, his normal days, he spends his holiday resting, whereas he spends it using it to teach others and prepare for other certifications. So that's how very resourceful he can be. So we're very excited to have him take us through this session today. Tayo, are you still on? Hello, Tayo. Are you still with us?
Yes, I
Can
am.
you? Okay, so we're still waiting for him to set up the screen. So he's someone that
All right.
you can always run to and all that. So
Right. I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see it?
Not yet. So there's the screen sharing button
Uh,
below the screen.
yeah. Thanks. Doing that now. So this should be. You should be able to see it.
Yes, you can see the screen now.
Okay. Awesome. Right. Thanks. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on the session. Um, Today we'll be talking about securing AWS network communications, and I just wanted to do a quick recap on what the services, network services relating to AWS are, for those who don't know it yet. And we will go into securing the AWS network services very soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and I'll respond. Okay, so what is AWS networking service? It stems from the basics or the background of what is a network. A network is a way of communication between devices or services or any kind of object that is capable of communication. That's what a network is. And network always always involves more than one component. There's a send receiver, or there's multiple senders or multiple receiver, or a single sender and multiple receivers, or multiple senders and a single receiver. It depends on the scenario. But in this case, that's just the summary of what a network is. Now, AWS networking allows the creation of fast and reliable, secure network. AWS offers various cloud services, and those cloud services have, some of them are classified into data services, some of them are classified into storage services, some of them are classified into network services. The focus of this session will be around the network services and how we can secure the communications using those network services. So it's very, very important that you get familiar with some of the AWS services and how it can be used to create a network. I'm going to do a quick overview of some of those services before we go into the AWS network communication. Now, if you have been using AWS services for quite a while, I'm going to use a slide from one of the AWS training centers that I know is online for free. And this picture that you're looking at here is the common AWS services that most people know. If you've been in AWS before now, you would know about the uh, VPC basics, the Elastic Load Balancer, the CloudFront, the Route 53, the VPC endpoints, the private link, VPC peering, Transit VPC, Transit Gateway, site-to-site VPN, Client VPN, Direct Connect, and VPC Advanced. Now, your level in learning AWS determines some of the services that you will know. For example, if you're just starting off in your AWS career, you would know about VPC, CloudFront, Route 53, endpoints, private link, and VPC peering. You might not use that, but if you're a developer just starting off, these are some you start interacting with. And as soon as you start interacting with those services, you would also know about some sub services which are under those main services, such as CIDR block, which is basically IP addressing, internet gateway, subnets, route tables, NAT, IP address, security group, network access control. And as you move further into an advanced level of AWS, say like a DevOps engineer, you will know different services like cloud formation, logging, monitoring, network automation, and uh, site-to-site VPN, client VPN. And if you start to go advanced, maybe if you're doing the AWS specialty certification track that allows you to know about different AWS services such as advanced VPC settings or configuration, you will begin to see some additional services like Direct Connect and VPC configuration. Now, some of the common AWS services that we must have encountered at some point or we must have read online. And just to explain what some of those services are before we even go into how to secure it, because it's important to understand how these services work before you even know how to secure it. The first one is the VPC, which is a common one. So a VPC is a cloud service that allows you to create an isolated virtual network for AWS resources. So think about um, when you own a plot of land, one of the first things you're going to do is to find a way of fencing it. And when you're fencing, you're creating like a protection barrier that allows nobody access into that property that you own. So think of your fence in AWS as your VPC. It basically just takes everything that you have, builds a wall around it, and make sure that nothing goes in or nothing comes out primarily through that means. You can have additional layers of security above that, but from the basic level, this is just something that unites every single resources, or in this case, we call them workloads that in AWS. And any user that is in the AWS account can host applications in that VPC. They can access or manage resources in that VPC, provided they have the right permissions attached to them. So this is the first service that I want to talk about. And some of the notable concepts that you can also read about when it comes to VPC are things like subnet, which is like a network segment of your VPC, or your route table, which is a basically like an instruction manual that tells users making them know, or users traffic that allows them to know what resources they can get into or what can go out of the VPC. Is basically like a route table is more or less like the instruction you give to your security guard at the gate, and you say if somebody doesn't dress this way, do not allow them to pass through this way, do not allow them to pass in this way, please let them go. So that is what the route table is. And then there's a gateway. So a gateway is more or less like the gates, as the name sounds, which enables communication. It's the one that opens or closes based on the rules defined in the route table. The next service that I want to talk about is the elastic load balancer. The elastic load balancer is something that sits outside the fence. In this case, it sits outside the VPC. It's basically a service that helps you to load balance different services. And when we say load balance, what does it mean? You can imagine if you had in that, piece of land or in that property, if you had a car and that car breaks down, you're unable to use that car for that particular day. But if you need to use a car again for if you need to use your car again that same day, it's best you have an alternative on ground. In this case, it could be your personal car, it could be a hired car. But as long as you have an alternative in place, should the first one, the other one, and move around. That's thing that the elastic load balancer does. It ensures that your services stays consistent, and as soon as your services stays consistent, it ensures that the different services that you have in AWS does not go down. So one of the key features of whatever it is that you call a load balancer is number one, high availability. It must be something that allows your applications or your services to be available across all regions without any need for you saying, I want to turn off something. So you can imagine if you had two cars running at the same time, the engines start running. As soon as one car fails, you can just hop out of the car and go into the other one. Compare it to where you have two cars, one of them is not starting, and then the other one is running already. And as soon as the one that is running already shuts down, you have to first start the car before it can start to move. And that timeline can cause delay in slow performance in your app. So you don't want your customers to have that experience. That's why you have a load balancer. The second thing that the load balancer does is it provides some level of security that can be integrated with certificate management solutions such as SSL and user authentication. It also has robust monitoring that allows you to monitor the health of your applications in real time. It can help you monitor and know when something is down. For example, in this diagram that you're looking at, I have three different applications. Those applications are hosted in three availability zones. The first availability zone is in AZ1, which can be US East 1. The second one can be US East 2, and the other one can be Asia East 1. And when your users are trying to access this application, should the application in availability zone 1 go down, they are automatically routed to availability zone 2 without knowing that they are now on availability zone 2. So this ensures consistency in service. You can imagine if you wanted to access your bank reasons, the bank app was down due to maintenance, you'll be very, very frustrated. But because there's an elastic there's an application load balancer um, placed there, it allows you to easily just move to the next availability zone without knowing that a maintenance is happening in availability zone 1. So that's basically what the elastic load balancer does. Now there are different types of load balancers in AWS. There's what we call the application load balancer, there's what we call the network load balancer, there's what we call the gateway load balancer, there's what we call the classic load balancer. You can actually read more about that because I don't want us to dwell so much on that, but it's interesting to look at, after this. The next service I want us to talk about is Route 53. AWS Route 53 is a scalable and a highly available domain name service. It allows end users to interact with application reliably without using their IP address. So let me give you a typical case of what network perspective. Let's say you want to visit a web called abc.com, and you type in the abc.com on your browser here. Let me just get my pen. Now, let's say you type abc.com on your browser here, and the abc.com that you've typed is sent to the DNS of your computer. In this case, it could be your computer or your mobile phone. Every network that has access to the internet will have an IP address and a DNS service associated with it, one way or another. Now, when your browser checks your DNS service, which is already on your computer or on your phone, it asks for where abc.com is, and that computer sends this request to the IP address. The IP address of that DNS server sends the request of, please, where is abc.com, to the relevant authority. In this case, there's like a chain, or it's like a web of several spiders where your DNS servers are. DNS servers are like friends all over the internet. They are like one family. They're constantly telling each other about themselves based on some network protocols that have been set when the DNS servers were configured. And then they would have told themselves where abc.com is. And when abc.com gets there, it asks Route 53. In this case, Route 53 might probably be where your domain name is hosted, and that's how you're connecting to your application. And when it gets to Route 53 replies that DNS server with what the IP address of abc.com is, and then that sends it back to your phone. And when it sends it to your phone now knows where abc.com is, and then every other conversation that needs to happen to abc.com just happens seamlessly. Now, this simple description happens in microseconds, so a lot of people do not see it happen in real time, but this is like a breakdown of how it works. Now, um, the next service I want to talk about is AWS VPN. When you hear the word VPN, VPN means virtual private network. Now, I know I've mentioned VPC before and I've mentioned VPN before. This is the difference between a VPC and VPN. A VPC is like the fence around your house. A VPN is like your personal chat, like your personal pause in your house. For example, you might have two rooms in your house and you want to move something from one point to another. You just have to take in that pause between your room to the room one to room two. And you do this, it happens internally. Or if you want to send it outside, I can have a pipe that I'm going to create. And in this case, this is like a virtual pipe that you create from inside your AWS account, and it links to the external person that you want to send the information to. It's a secured, highly encrypted pipe, and that allows communication to happen between things inside the VPC and things that are outside on the internet. It's a very secured way of ensuring that unauthorized access, I mean, anybody can have access to the internet now, but if you do not have the right VPN configuration, you might not be able to access things inside my AWS account. It's a way of securing configurations for users. So this is what AWS VPN mean. You can also read more about it online, or you can ask your questions and I'll clarify. Now, there are two types of AWS VPN that I that is worth knowing about. You can have more than this, or it can be combined in a different way. But these are two critical ones that a lot of people need to know. The first one is AWS Client VPN. A client VPN is used when somebody remotely wants to connect to an AWS account. And I'll give you a typical use case. AWS Client VPN requires three key things. Number one, you need to configure what they call node in AWS. Number two, you load a VPN client, which will be installed on your workstation. In this case, it could be a Mac or a PC, or a Windows PC. And then you'd have your OpenVPN configuration, which you download from the AWS profile and load that AWS client VPN configuration in the client app that you have downloaded to your PC, downloaded and installed to your PC. And as soon as you do that, it establishes connection between your laptop and AWS. It makes it seem like your laptop um, your laptop is directly connected to the resources in AWS, and it's a very secured encryption. As you can see in my diagram here, you have associated subnets like that you have in AWS. It allows you to access resources. You can connect to other networks. You can download and install the VPN client, and then you just need to log in using the VPN client, and automatically you get access into the AWS environment. So this is how the AWS client VPN works. The second one, before I pause and take any question, is the AWS site-to-site VPN. The AWS site-to-site VPN is used in a much more robust environment. Like I said, the client VPN was for users that are directly connecting to AWS. The site-to-site VPN is for an organization that does not just want to connect to AWS, but want to connect their entire office network to AWS. And this is very, very feasible. All you need to do is to set up your transit gateway and your virtual private gateway on AWS. And once you do that, you download the configuration files from the AWS Management Console and you put this into your SD-WAN capable device. There are some devices that can do site-to-site VPN, and there are some that cannot do site-to-site VPN. So that's also something you need to note. And when you're trying to download them, get device that can do the site-to-site VPN, is what to note that check on AWS console to know compatible devices that can do site-to-site VPN. I've seen some cases where some devices can do site-to-site VPN, but uh, it's quite challenging for you to get uh, that device to work with AWS site-to-site VPN. So please also note and check that you have compatible hardware before you proceed with implementing your site-to-site VPN from your local machine to AWS or from your data center to AWS. And this is where I just take a quick break to before we go into how to secure AWS communication in AWS. I want to check with you guys and know what questions we have before I proceed. Is this a good time? Blessing, David, should I go ahead or?
Yes, please. Yes, yes. So thank you very much for that. I really learned a whole lot, and I'm very certain all those on the call have. So we have our first question: which load balancer addresses security aspects?
Okay, so just going back into the previous slide where I mentioned load balancers. Um, I mentioned that there are different type of application load balancers, and each one of them have their function. Now, you cannot use an application load balancer where you intend to use network services, and you cannot use a network load balancer where you intend to use services relating to applications. So you need to first be sure that you're using the right load balancer. Now, on each of that load balancer, in the load balancer setting, and I'm going to go into the AWS console in a few moments from now. The load balancer has the capability of setting certain rules that prevents like certain rules that you can use to handle the security side of AWS. I'm going to go into maybe after before we finish, I'm going to go into my AWS console to show you the load balancer service that addresses the security. But the load balancer itself has the security configuration rules where you can define certain properties of what needs to be connected and what's not connected. So I'll go into the place and show you where it is, but you need to make sure that you're doing that under the load balancer that is applicable to that service.
Okay, thank you very much. The second one, can load balancer also do DR functions? I don't know
So
what DR functions.
DR, my understanding of DR means disaster recovery. Now, disaster recovery is it's a topic that is relating to load balancer, but it is not a topic that it's a topic that is relating to load balancer, but it's the topic that you use load balancers for. Here's what I mean. Disaster recovery happens on different levels. So if you're using an application, you need to have different disaster recovery processes in place, such as maybe a backup or a snapshot or a load balancer. There's a configuration on that load balancer that we call it's basically the number of units that a service needs to have. I can't remember the word right now, but it's the number of units. So it can do load balancer in that stead. I mean, by taking a snapshot of your instance and saying, should always have two instances running, should one of them go down, have this in place, make this one come up. There's a way you can do that with the load balancer, but you also need to make sure that the number of instances configured to work with that load balancer can support whatever disaster recovery design that you might have in mind. But DR is a very wide topic, and I don't think it is only limited of if we limit disaster recovery to load balancer. I think it will be great if you can have disaster recovery implemented on multiple layers. And when you implement it on multiple layers, it means that your disaster recovery is not only dependent on the load balancer. For example, if the load balancer itself fails, do you have a snapshot of the image somewhere that can run? Do you have it configured across multiple availability zones? Do you have a backup of any sort for any S3 bucket should someone accidentally delete it? Do you have S3 tiering in place for archiving? So disaster recovery is quite vast. It will be great if you can implement it across multiple folds rather than having it in one place. That way, you are able to minimize what we call the blast area. So, a blast area in networks or a blast area in terms of security and disaster recovery means the number of points. Once you minimize your blast area, it makes sure that your disaster recovery is actually a real disaster recovery. I mean, there's no point any application going down and it takes you 2 days or 1 day to bring it back up. That's not disaster recovery. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much. I really hope it helps. So the last one before we continue, in a traditional network, we have VPN and IPsec VPN. Does this mean that we AWS VPN that with AWS VPN we do not need to set IPsec configuration?
Actually, I mentioned that there are two types of AWS VPNs. There's the client VPN and there's the site-to-site VPN. When you talk about setting up the VPN, IPsec is a protocol on that VPN that allows you to ensure that your tunnel is more encrypted. It increases the layer of encryption that you have based on some parameters that are defined in. Now, you will still use IPsec configuration in the VPN configuration in AWS. There's a part where you're going to mention that you're doing an IPsec configuration, especially when you do IPsec site-side VPN. There's a place where you have to define the pre-shared key or some parameter, just like the same way that you're doing it on the traditional network devices. It's the same way that is applicable. So I mean, what you have with the AWS networking is a replica of what you have in your physical environment, plus lots of advancements that physical hardware is limiting you from achieving, that has now been transferred to the software layer level. It's the same thing that is happening. So if you've been very consistent with setting up site-to-site VPN, setting up another site-to-site VPN between your local environment and the AWS cloud will be a walk in the park. Okay. I hope that helps the questions. Any other questions before we proceed?
Oh, no, none for now, so that we can, yes, not for now. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for those that sent in their questions. We'll be expecting more.
Okay, thanks. So now that we have covered some of the security services in AWS, um, the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is something that you might not see directly on the slide at this point, is how to secure your AWS environment. And to secure your AWS environment, that would actually start with the VPC. So to not take too much of anyone's time, I might be logging into my VPC. Permit me to stop sharing and share my screen again. One sec, please. Okay, I'm going again. Okay, great. So here's my screen showing the AWS services, and I'm just going to go over how to secure some of these services. I'm going to go over it by just talking through the screen of some of the services and then let you guys know. Now, the first service I want to talk about is your VPC. In this case, the VPC from the AWS console is usually here. And if you're wondering how I did this, is I clicked on search and then I just start up the service. I bookmarked it as one of my favorite services so that it's easy for me to access it anytime I want to. Now, this is my VPC. And in the VPC, sorry, it seems like my connection is a bit sluggish, but it's fine. All right. So this is my VPC. When I click on this VPC here, you can see the different subnets that I've configured in my VPC. And this is a private network IP address. If you've been very conversant with it, this is a private network IP address involved in my VPC. And there's a service here called Flow Logs. For you to secure your VPC, it's highly recommended that you enable VPC Flow Logs. What's the purpose of VPC flow logs? VPC flow logs allows you to monitor activities that are happening. For example, I can monitor, I can create a flow log called tile flow. And in this flow log, I can either I can make my VPC flow logs to aggregate every minute or every 10 minutes, and I can send that logs to the S3 bucket. Now, the purpose of having a VPC flow log is simple. I'm trying to ensure that anybody that comes out through my gates, I am recording it somewhere for audit purposes. Now, when you enable VPC flow log, you can either keep it in the AWS format or in a custom format, and then you can make sure that the logs are saved on system. And you can also add a tag. One of the things I like to do is to create tags for my VPC flow logs. For example, I can say application, that's the application that this flow log is saving for. I can give it a name, say um, website flow. Now, when you enable the VPC flow logs, it can help you create logs that are saved in an S3 bucket. And automatically, those logs are collected. So every form of information that goes in and out of your AWS environment is automatically logged into an S3 bucket. And just to conclude that set, I'm just going to put in a name called test log. And I'm going to create a flow log here. And sorry, there's a value that is probably asking for. Okay, yeah. So it's asking for an S3 bucket. In this case, I don't have an S3 bucket, so I can quickly create an S3 bucket here and copy the ARN of the S3 bucket and paste it here. So let me quickly. And my apologies, this seems my network is dragging. But I know most of us here have always created, S3 buckets. So if you're watching this, this is not the first time you're creating S3 bucket, definitely. I'll definitely make this faster next time. But for now, let's make do with this. Right. So creating a new bucket called tile flow and make the bucket available in US East 1 and make sure that object ownership is ensure that all the security is in place, bucket ownership preferred, and block all public access. This is very important. And no tags, like I said, I like to add tags, so I can put application again. and always ensure that you're using the AWS KMS managed service, which is not the S3 managed service. It's not like this isn't encrypted, but it's just that the KMS is recommended and it's more secured. I can choose from any KMS key that I have, and when the KMS encryption is there and enabled, I'm just going to create the bucket. So as soon as I have this new bucket, I'll copy the ARN of the bucket and use that. So this is the S3 bucket I just created, and this is the ARN of that bucket. Just going to copy this and paste it in my VPC flow logs that I'm trying to create. And as soon as I do this, this should help us create our flow log. So now we now have logs of activities that are happening in this VPC logged into an S3 bucket, ready for us to use whenever I want to use it. So this is one of the first things that I would recommend that we do. Now, before we move further, there's something that is worth mentioning. In AWS, there's what we call the pillars of security. The pillars of security are things that you need to adhere to ensure that you have a highly available and secured AWS environment. Now, those things are what you need to put in place to ensure that your AWS security, your AWS network environment is very secured. Now, I'm going to show you the 6 of them, one after the other, in that, but I'm just going to show you all 6 of them, and then you can make do with which ones are actually working. So let's get to this. So let's bring this out for you. So that's what we call the security pillars of AWS, and if you do not know it, you can search for it. Security pillars in AWS, and all the security pillars speaks about key things. The first one of them is identity access management. And for people, identity access management is basically how users are connecting to your environment. So you need to make sure that you use strong sign-in mechanisms to ensure that your AWS environment is secured. Make sure that if any user needs to access your AWS environment, they have serious sign-in, they have strong sign-in that's good password, and uppercase, a mix of uppercase and lowercase, and also to ensure that those users that are accessing the AWS environment are attached to the right policies, and also ensure that those users cannot access resources that you know they are not supposed to access. So make sure that you use group. Don't give your users directly, don't attach permissions directly to your user profile. Attach them to a group and make sure that that group has the right permissions that you need. So those are one of the things that you need to use. So once you have the resource in place, deploying your network in AWS requires you to have VPCs. And those VPCs, if anybody needs to access those VPCs, they need to have like some permissions attached to them. Sure that you're using the um, least privilege principle. When we say least privilege principle, it means should anybody try to access your AWS environment, those users are not directly able to access everything. They should require permission to access any new service that is needed in AWS. That's the first service. That's the first thing that you need to know. Now, some of the things that we recommend that you implement in AWS is what we call landing zone or control tower. So, what is landing zone or what is control tower? If you come into your AWS account and you search for landing zone, now landing zone is a secure and scalable multi-account AWS environment based management practice. It allows you to use AWS control tower and automate provisioning of AWS accounts, and you can manage different people based on some set of rules that you that define inside another AWS service that we call AWS guardrails. So this is control tower is one of the secure um, measures that you can put in place to help you manage IAM and ensure that uh, people accessing your network, that are your staff or users within your network, is one of the ways that can ensure that those people make sure that they have the right access. So this is landing zone. When you want to set it up, they're going to ask you some basic questions, which I do not want to go through right now. But just to walk you through this before I click on setup, it would ask you to configure your organization name. It would ask you if you want to create a sandbox. Then it's going to tell you what are the accounts that you want to share. And then finally, it's going to ask you to confirm the guardrails that you'll be using. Rules are like set of rules that AWS also creates that works with this. So this is one service that you need to also know about. The next service that, or the next pillar of security that you need to put in place, is detective controls. Detective controls are things you put in place that helps you to monitor events that are happening in your AWS accounts. And what are examples of detective control? The first detective control service that I want to talk about is CloudWatch, which I'm sure that a lot of people here must have seen before. So this is AWS CloudWatch. CloudWatch is basically like a uh, whistleblower, or sorry, a security guard. So um, that security guard uses some metrics to know when to alert you about certain security happening. So just think about it as a security guard, and then that has his whistleblower. And as soon as something does not conform with what you have defined in your AWS environment, it automatically screams and rings an alarm. That's the same um that guard duty does. Oh, sorry, Cloud does. And the good thing about CloudWatch is it can go into the S3 bucket that we have created and fetch information from that S3 bucket and say based on things that have happened. For example, if you say somebody from certain country accesses your AWS application, it should block. You can set it on your load balancer to block that person, and you can also set it on CloudWatch that as soon as CloudWatch sees information that somebody was blocked from a specific location or a geolocation, it should ring an alarm for you. As you can see, this is what the CloudWatch dashboard looks like. It's got alarms of different activities that are happening and can instantly notify me if anything that I do not want happens. For example, I have an alarm that I've set for billing, and as soon as my spending exceeds a certain amount, it automatically notifies me that I'm beginning to spend beyond what I've defined in my AWS account. So there are more that can be defined. You can come to the logs here and create a new log group, or you can create an alarm if you want it to be an alarm. For example, you can configure what they also call application insights that helps you to monitor your databases and workloads in an AWS environment. So using this helps you to monitor your network and also helps you to secure. So one of the pillars of security in AWS that we talk about after identity access management is detective controls, and some of the detective control tools are AWS CloudWatch and the CloudWatch metrics, which is what you're looking at. These are some of the metrics. Let me click here and click on all metrics. So you can see some of the metrics that I already defined. Another service that we talk about is what we call transit gateway. And the final one is route analyzer, which, you know, I don't know if we have enough time to go into that, but I'll just quickly show you that. The next one I want to talk about before we move is the infrastructure protection. Infrastructure in your groups exist under EC2. So let me go to security groups. I must have clicked on the wrong service. So this is another service called security groups. Security groups is the first service that you get by default in AWS. As soon as you get an AWS account and you're trying to spin up a simple EC2 instance, you get a default security group, And that security default security group, or mistakes that a lot of people make, is they use the default security group. Try to not use a default security group. Try to have your own security group. And as you can see, this is one of my security groups that I've had before. And in this security group, I can define inbound and outbound rules. Now, I would recommend that you do not, um, if you're creating an enterprise environment, I would recommend that you have a VPC that handles inbound traffic and a VPC that handles outbound traffic. If it is a complex enterprise environment, this is a better way of building a scalable application. If it's a simple environment, you can have your inbound rules and outbound rules in the same VPC under the same security group. But if it's in a scalable environment, I would go with the other route. The next services that you also need to know is network access control list. They call it NACL, NACL, network access control list. This is it. It's a feature under VPC. It allows you to define what gets into the VPC and what doesn't. So this is network access control list. As you can see, this is my network access control. I have my subnetwork, I have my total inbound rules, I have my subnet associations, and I can define, some of those things here. As you can see, these are the traffic, these are outbound traffic, and this is a default VPC that no service is currently using in my environment. Please do not allow all except you intentionally need to. So these are some of the services that you need to get. Another service that you also need to know is the AWS Transit Gateway Route Table and Gateway Load Balancer. So if we go to this, there's a service here called Network Transit Gateway. Let me come here. Um, there's the service called Network Firewall, which is also one of the security services you know. Firewall helps you to secure incoming and outgoing services, just like the egress and outgress that you have in VPC. It will be very interesting if you can spend a little bit more time to read about these things, because I'm not sure we can cover all that. But basically, it's a way that you create a firewall that protects the VPC. So just see like an additional layer of security in that availability zone in that VPC where you have your services, and you can add different rules to the group, and you can update the route tables of the firewall rule. So another service, I don't know. Do we still have more time, Blessing? Okay, I think we do. Right. So another service I need to quickly mention, or another pillar of security that I need to mention.
No, we should soon be rounding up.
Okay. Another pillar of security that we also need to know is the data protection. Data protection, which is also a subset of the network security, is how to protect your data from AWS environments. Ensure that you're encrypting data where it needs to be. Ensure that nobody has read or write access where they need to have. And should someone require a read access, which means for them to see the information inside, ensure that they do not have access to write into the environment. And then you also have incident response. Incident response is basically when things happen in your AWS environment, how do you pick up those things that have been found or reported? One of the biggest tools in AWS that can help you handle this thing is AWS Config, and the second one is AWS Security Hub. Now, AWS Config is basically a rule. It's like a record book that helps you to keep. So this is it's called AWS Config. So there are two configs. There's app config and there's config. So please note that it's AWS config that we're looking at. And then the other service that we also need to know is AWS Security Hub, which I'm going to go into as soon as I finish showing you this config. And that will be the final one that I'm showing before we have any questions. So let me just open this AWS config for everyone here to see. Mm, okay. What's happening? Okay, it's loading. All right. So, I mean, while this is loading, I don't know if anybody have any question. If you have any question, you can let me know, and if otherwise, we can move to the next phase of things. Right, Blessing. I think I'm okay. Yeah. So this is AWS config, and this is basically what it does. You define some rules. It checks what is compliant or what is not compliant. It can also feed the information of what is not compliant into an S3 bucket, and that S3 bucket is what you then use for. Uh, the S3 bucket is what you then use to feed, CloudWatch or any other service that you want. And the final service that I told you I was going to talk about is AWS Security Hub, which is basically like AWS proprietary um, uh, security monitoring and compliance tool. And this is Security Hub. It's quite robust. Rather than getting a third-party solution, one of the solutions you can consider is AWS Security Hub. Or you can choose to use this alongside other third-party solutions that helps to monitor infrastructure or workloads in the cloud. So this is Security Hub, and I'm just waiting for this to pop out. Okay, so Security Hub basically is like a console that gives you more beyond what is compliant and what is not compliant. It can help you to remediate issues. For example, if you find issues in your AWS environment, it can find it and it can report it to a tool, and it can help you take action, using CloudWatch or a Lambda function to help you resolve that. For example, if you have an S3 bucket that is publicly exposed and you configure your security hub to flag that as a non-compliant resource in your AWS environment, you can also create a Lambda function, or some kind of action, customized action that helps you to create a ticket maybe somewhere on Slack or somewhere in your tool like Jira, and then remediate it automatically using a Lambda function, and then notifies you again in the communication channel. So that's basically the tools that we need to put in place for an overview to make your AWS network secure. So if you don't have much time, I think I'm just going to stop here. And sorry about the network. To you sharing now.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, okay, David, you're on.
Hello, hello everyone. Let's see. Okay, so we do have like a quiz, and the winner of the quiz is going to be allocated an AWS credit voucher. So we're going to try to make it as short and as brief as possible. So we have about 6 questions to go through. So there's a few rules to keep in mind. Number one, if you've won any one of our prizes before, you can't win again. So if you've been allocated either an AWS security certification exam voucher via the community, or you've been allocated an AWS credit voucher via the community before, there's no need to bother to play the game because we won't be allocating the prize to you a second time. So we want to try as much as possible to spread the prizes around. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's quiz. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off. Oh, let's see, classic mode. Okay, so I'm going to put a link in the chat window, and we're also going to share our screen. So the link to the code is in the chat window. And you can also go to www.kahoot And when you get to www.kahoot.it, you can put in the PIN number 277466. So you can put in the PIN number 277466, and that will add you to the quiz. So I can see we have SP joined. So we'll just give it a few more seconds for people to join. So make sure you join very quickly. So you can see Malik, Apology, we got SP. So just countdown of about 30 seconds, after which we're going to have to start because of the time. So we're over time already. Want to make sure that we get done. Okay. So about 15 more seconds, and we're gonna about 15 more seconds, about 10 more seconds now. We're gonna start. Okay. And it's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. So the first question for today: how should you protect an Amazon LDS MySQL DB running in a private VPC subnet from a DOS attack coming from an IP? You have 4 options. Select the option that you think is the right answer. This is a very interesting question. So let's see. So the answer is B, and 6 people got that correctly. So well done. So let's see who got it correctly first. So we have KP. So well done, KP. So we cannot configure deny for security group. So that takes away security group from that. And in this case, we're trying to block incoming. So incoming rule is what we specify. Number 2, an EC2 instance has been compromised. What would you not do in this case? So you do everything else apart from 1, responding to an EC2 instance that has been compromised. Okay. Oh, wow. So the answer is ensure all passwords of all IAM users are changed. That's not something that you're going to do because an EC2 instance is compromised. That is too disruptive. So take a snapshot of DBS volume. So that can be useful for investigation. You want to capture the state for forensic investigation. So, but definitely not changing all passwords of all users. All IAM don't want to do that. So that's the answer. So I guess the scoreboard is not changing. So let's see the next question. The AWS System Manager run command is not working on some EC2 instances. How should you diagnose the issue? And the answer is ensure the SSM agent is running on the instances if the run command is not working. So let's see if there's anything in the scoreboard. So we still have KP Freaky and Balaji at the top. So well done. So let's go to the next question. You are receiving an unprotected private key file error when connecting to an EC2 using SSH. What is a possible cause? So Taiwo, the way to play the game is to go to kahoot.it and join the game using the PIN number. So the answer is the private key has the wrong file permissions if you're getting that error message. So let's see what the scoreboard looks like. Any changes? Oh, we have a few changes. We have Balaji now leading, followed by KP. So 2 more questions to go, and then we have our winner. Number 5. You need to implement IDS for your VPC in AWS with complete control over the IDS. What is the ideal solution? So the answer to this one is to use a custom solution in the AWS marketplace. So remember the question says you need complete control over the IDS and you're implementing that for your VPC. So the answer to that is use a custom solution in the marketplace, not a managed service. So let's see what the scoreboard like. Any changes on the scoreboard? And we have key at the top, followed by biology. So there's still one more question to determine our winner for today. So pay close attention. Pay close attention. Final question of the day. You want to ensure that instances in a VPC use your managed DNS server instance. How should you implement that? And the answer is to create a new DHCP option set and replace the existing one. So that's the answer to that. So let us see what the scoreboard looks like. So on the scoreboard on the podium, number 3, we have Malik. Well done, Malik. And number 2, we have Freaky. Well done, Freaky. And number 1, we have Bolaji. Well done, Bolaji. So Bolaji is number 1, and we have runners up as KP and SP. So Bolaji, what you're going to do is I'm going to put an email chat window. You want to do is you want to send your email as well as your full name to that email address, and then we're going to reach out to you with your voucher. So I'll put that in the chat window. So let me go ahead and do that now very quickly. And there we go. Okay. So there we go. So that's it in the chat window. So Balaji, send that to us, and then we'll go ahead and do that. So I'll hand back over to moderator Blessing to bring a close to the session. So over to you, Blessing.
Okay, thank you very much, David. That's awesome. Congratulations, Bolaji. Congratulations to everyone that attempted the quiz. See, one thing I really like about attempting quizzes is that you get to really test yourself to know how well you know that thing. And then it gets to help you understand if you're making headway or if you need to relearn some things, or maybe you were in a haste and maybe you picked the wrong one. So it's a great one. I'm really proud of everyone that's tried their hands on this. I'm very certain that there's some things that are already that will get stuck, that you really take away from this. And I'm happy that you guys took out time, despite that some people are still having in the festive season mood, and some people are really kicked off. And people took out the time to join us in this session. We are happy to have you here. Thank you everyone for taking our time to come. Till tomorrow, we still have, remember, we're having this session till end of this month. It remains Mondays and Tuesdays, same time, same venue. Just keep the dialogue in. And then, since we're always doing the person that wins doesn't win again, hopefully you be the one to win another time. So we got you covered. As far as you're always coming and paying attention, you have something for you. And the aim is not just for someone to get prizes. The aim is for us to take something away that will help improve our cloud journey, help us in our cloud journey. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to our moderator, to our coach. Thank you to my co-moderator, Mr. David. Thank you to the coach, that's Tayo. Thank you very much for the wonderful session. Really learned a lot on communication, network communication. It's really quite a tricky topic, but yet you handled it very well and exceptionally. So we are very, very grateful for that. Thank you all the amazing people that took out their time to stay with us and most especially ask questions. I see that there's one thing we didn't address. That's Mr. Chibike's Israel question. I think he said the screen was blurry. So please, when we're joining in tomorrow, I think it's your settings resolution. When you join in and maybe the display is a little bit blurry, try to go to your settings on your phone or the medium you're using to join in, then check the display ratio. If it's on the lowest ratio, then you increase it to the highest. That's if it's not on automatic resolution. So that can be one of the issue because it was quite clear on my own end. So that would be all for today, and we can't wait to see you tomorrow. Have a good night.